It is 1 minute past midnight on the 15th of November, 1942. Somewhere below the armored deck of an American battleship, in a compartment lit only by red battle lamps, 4 men sit around a mechanical computer the size of a small room. Gears turn, cams shift. A pointer slides across a graduated wheel. None of the men have windows. None of them can see the sea. None of them have laid eyes on the enemy they are about to kill. 8,400 yards off the port bow, a Japanese battleship named Kirishima cuts a slow line through the black water of Ironbottom Sound. She is 30 years old. She was at Pearl Harbor. She was at Midway. She was at Santa Cruz. Tonight, she is steering toward an American airfield on Guadalcanal. She means to grind into rubble by dawn. Her lookouts have the finest night optics in the world. They have been dark adapted for hours. They are scanning the horizon in slow, disciplined arcs. They see nothing. In the next 7 minutes, Kirishima will be hit somewhere between 9 and 20 times by shells the size of a grown man. She will lose her bridge. She will lose her steering. She will lose her engines. 212 of her sailors will die, and she will never know who killed her, because the man who is about to kill her is not on a bridge with a pair of binoculars. He is a quiet 54-year-old rear admiral in wire-rimmed glasses, standing beside a green glass screen, watching a single point of light drift slowly across a cathode ray tube. He is not shouting. He is not pacing. He looks, if you saw him from the doorway, like a country schoolteacher who has wandered by accident into a uniform. His name is Willis Augustus Lee. 22 years ago, at the Antwerp Olympics of 1920, this same man won 7 medals for shooting, 5 gold, 1 silver, 1 bronze. He was the most decorated athlete of those games. The record would stand for 60 years. Tonight, in a compartment with no windows, he is about to end the age of optical naval warfare. This is the story of those 7 minutes. And of the man the United States Navy almost forgot. To understand why a battleship duel is happening in this narrow, wreck-strewn stretch of water tonight, you have to go back 3 months. August 7th, 1942. United States Marines wade ashore on an island most Americans have never heard of. Guadalcanal. It is hot. It is jungled. It is malarial. In the middle of it, on a strip of open ground the Japanese had been clearing for their own runway, the Marines find an unfinished airstrip. Their engineers finish it in the mud, in the rain, in the dark, under sniper fire. They call it Henderson Field. From Henderson, American dive bombers can reach Japanese convoys steaming down the chain of islands the sailors have started calling the slot. American fighters can drive Japanese aircraft out of the sky over the beachhead. Without Henderson, the Marines die. Without Henderson, Guadalcanal falls. And without Guadalcanal, the entire American theory of how to fight a war across an ocean comes apart. The Japanese understand this, so they keep coming. Cruisers and destroyers slipping down the slot at night, shelling the airfield, landing troops. The Americans start calling these night runs the Tokyo Express. And so far, the United States Navy has almost no answer for them, because at night in 1942, the Pacific belongs to Japan. For 20 years, the Imperial Navy has trained in darkness. They have built optics no other nation matches. They have drilled their lookouts until they can spot a silhouette by starlight. They have a torpedo, the Type 93. It runs cleaner and farther and faster than anything the Allies own. Almost no wake, almost invisible. And they have a doctrine that says the night is where smaller fleets defeat larger ones. In August, off an island called Savo, 4 Allied cruisers are sunk in 32 minutes by a Japanese force that arrives unseen and leaves before the survivors understand what has happened. The American ships had radar that night. Their crews didn't trust it. They were still looking with their eyes when the first Japanese salvos hit. Then, on the night of the 12th of November, it happens again. Only worse, 2 American rear admirals, Daniel Callahan and Norman Scott, take a scratch force of cruisers and destroyers into Ironbottom Sound to stop a Japanese battleship from shelling Henderson Field. What follows is not a battle so much as a knife fight in a closet. The range closes to under 3,000 yards. Searchlights stab through the darkness. Ships fire on whoever they can see, sometimes on whoever they can't. By morning, the Japanese battleship, Hiei, is crippled and finished off by aircraft. By morning, both Callahan and Scott are dead. They die within minutes of each other on different ships in the same patch of water. They are the only 2 American flag officers killed in surface combat in the entire Pacific War. The cruiser Atlanta, with Scott aboard, takes 19 shell hits and a torpedo. 2 cruisers go down, 4 destroyers go down. The lighter cruiser, Juno, gutted but still limping home, is later torpedoed by a Japanese submarine and lost with nearly her entire crew. Among the dead on Juno are 5 brothers from Waterloo, Iowa. Their name is Sullivan. There is a mother in a small house in Iowa who does not know yet that on one night, in one patch of black water, she has lost every son she has. More than 700 American sailors are dead, and the Japanese are coming back tomorrow night. They are coming back with another battleship. Her name is Kirishima. Around her sail, 2 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, 9 destroyers. Their orders are simple. Tear Henderson Field apart with naval gunfire. Land reinforcements before dawn. End the campaign. The man who has to stop them is Vice Admiral William Halsey. He is 60 years old. He is exhausted. His cruiser force is shattered. His destroyer squadrons are scattered. He has 1 carrier in the area, the wounded USS Enterprise, still patching damage from earlier fights. Enterprise has 2 battleships escorting her, Washington South Dakota for protection against air attack. Doctrine says you do not strip a carrier of her battleship escort. Doctrine says you do not commit fast battleships to a night surface action in confined waters full of torpedoes. Doctrine says you wait for daylight. Halsey reads the message traffic. He looks at the chart. He cuts doctrine in half. He detaches Washington and South Dakota from Enterprise. He gives them 4 destroyers, Walk, Benham, Preston, Gwynn, and he sends them north into the dark. 6 ships against 14. If Halsey is wrong tonight, Enterprise is exposed to whatever the Japanese still have in the air. If Halsey is wrong, his battleships sail into a torpedo trap in waters they barely know. If Halsey is wrong, Henderson Field falls anyway, and the Pacific War shifts a year, maybe 2, in Japan's favor. If Halsey is right, that depends on the man he has just sent into the dark. Willis Lee is small. He wears wire-rimmed glasses that make his eyes look owlish. His hair is thinning. His voice is soft. When other admirals make speeches, he writes equations in the margin of his notes. At staff meetings, he often says almost nothing. He is, by any conventional definition, an unlikely warrior. He is also the best marksman the United States Navy has ever produced. What he learned at Antwerp was not how to shoot a rifle. He already knew how to shoot a rifle. What he learned was something deeper. At long range, hitting a target is a problem of physics, not bravery. Wind, temperature, barometric pressure, the slow drift of a bullet across 1,000 yards, the way the Earth's rotation tugs on a shell. Tiny errors compound. Precision is everything. Feel is nothing. The men around him in the Navy still fight ships by feel. Lee starts thinking about how to fight them by mathematics. In the years between the wars, while other officers chase prestiged commands, Lee buries himself in the unglamorous work. Gunnery development, fire control, the Fleet Training Office. He reads everything the British send back from the Atlantic about a new technology called radar. Radio waves bouncing off targets, returning as echoes, marking range and bearing in pure numbers. Exactly the kind of clean data a rifleman's mind has been waiting for his entire life. By 1940, Lee has been to the laboratories. He has read the reports. He has talked to the engineers. He understands the wavelengths. He understands the failure modes. Men who serve under him will say later that Ching Lee knows more about radar than the radar operators do. The nickname Ching came from his academy days. As a young Kentuckian, he had a fascination with East Asian history that older classmates found amusing. The name followed him for the rest of his career. He wore it without complaint. He didn't seem to care what anyone called him. In August of 1942, he is given Battleship Division 6, Washington, South Dakota. He makes Washington his flagship. And then he does something almost no other flag officer in the United States Navy is willing to do. He rebuilds the ship around the radar. In the older doctrine, radar is a backup. You find the enemy with your eyes. Then you check the range with radar, if you can. The bridge sees. The bridge decides. The bridge passes orders down through layers of officers and talkers, each one verifying, each one filtering. By the time the guns receive instructions, the picture is already several seconds old. Lee cuts the layers out. On Washington, the SG's surface search radar feeds the plotting room directly. The Mark III fire control radar feeds the gun directors directly. The Mark VIII range keeper, an analog mechanical computer full of gears and cams, receives those signals and solves the firing problem continuously in real time. While the ship is maneuvering, while the target is moving, while the wind is shifting, the men in the plotting room do not need a visual on the enemy. They do not even need to know the color of the sky. They simply need to trust the numbers. Lee drills them on this. He drills them in fog. He drills them in rain. He drills them at night with the lookouts blindfolded. He fires the main battery in exercises off Casco Bay, Maine, in complete darkness, using nothing but radar. The shells land within yards of target sleds the gunners never see. In a Navy whose senior officers were born into the age of optics and have spent their careers learning to read the wind, this is heresy. Lee doesn't argue with them. He just keeps training his crews. The hard part is not the technology. The hard part is the trust. Battleship captains have spent 30 years learning to glance up from a chart and verify with their own eyes. Lee is asking them to fight a ship they cannot see at a range they cannot personally confirm on the authority of a green glow on a screen. He is asking them to override every instinct their careers have built. The commanding officer of USS Washington is Captain Glenn Davis. He is 49 years old, quiet. Career officer, the kind of man who reads manuals on his off watch. Davis listens. Davis drills the procedures. Davis says very little. And in his own way, in his own time, Davis decides to believe. By November of 1942, when Halsey's order comes down, go north into Ironbottom Sound, stop Condo, Washington's crew has done something no other American battleship crew has done. They have learned to fight by electronics. They have learned to fight in the dark, what none of them know yet as they turn the bow toward Guadalcanal under a moonless sky, is that everything they have practiced is about to be tested in 7 minutes. Against a ship that has been at sea since the year Theodore Roosevelt was president, and that the only thing standing between Henderson Field and a Japanese battleship at point-blank range is a 54-year-old marksman who has decided to fight a sea battle with mathematics in a Navy that still fights with its eyes. At 2300 hours on the night of November 14th, Task Force 64 rounds the western point of Guadalcanal and turns north into Ironbottom Sound. 6 ships, single file, 4 destroyers lead. Walk first, then Benham, then Preston, then Gwynn. 2,000 yards back, the bow of USS Washington cuts a slow black line in the water. 2,000 yards behind Washington, the larger silhouette of USS South Dakota, the air is warm, 85 degrees, thick enough to taste. There is no moon. Low cloud blots out the stars. Far to the east, heat lightning flickers over some distant storm and dies again. The smell of jungle drifts off Guadalcanal. Wet wood, copra, gun oil, the old smoke of a campaign that has been burning for 3 months. Visibility is less than a mile. It is perfect weather for radar. It is the worst weather in the world for a lookout. The sound itself is not deep water. 8 miles wide between Guadalcanal and Savo Island, full of wrecks, Japanese, Australian, American. The sailors will joke the way sailors joke that the bottom is so packed with sunken hulls you could walk from one shore to the other and never get your feet wet. It is no place to maneuver a battleship. Lee has no choice, so he takes his 6 ships into the closet, into the dark, into the wrecks, and he waits for the door to open. At 23:05, Washington's SG radar paints its first contacts beyond Savo Island, multiple groups moving south. 12, 14. The count climbs on the screen. 3 separate groups. Kondo has split his force. It is exactly what Lee expected. He sends a message to all ships over the short-range radio circuit. This is Lee. We are going into a big fight. Keep your heads. Trust your instruments. That is all. No speech. No exhortation. Nothing about country or glory or the 700 dead of 2 nights ago. Just the 4 sentences he believes a fighting crew actually needs. Aboard Walk, at the head of the destroyer column, Commander Thomas Fraser stares at his own SG screen. Fraser is the most experienced destroyer skipper in the task force. He watches the Japanese destroyer screen come over the horizon at 12,000 yards. He asks for permission to launch torpedoes. It is the obvious play, a destroyer's reason to exist. 10 Mark 15 torpedoes in 2 mounts, ready to fire. Launch now at long range, and the Japanese will be ducking American fish before they even know what hit them. Lee says no. The reason is cold and exact. In the dark, with multiple ships maneuvering at 30 knots in a confined sound, no man will be able to tell which torpedoes are American and which are Japanese. Fraser's own battleships will be dodging 2 different sets of fish in 2 different directions, with no way to read them apart. Hold fire, guns only, maintain station. Fraser acknowledges. He passes the order to his gun crews. He turns his bridge talker back to the radar plot. He is going to fight a Japanese destroyer division at point-blank gun range without the weapon his ship was built around. He has 18 minutes left to live. At 23:17, Washington's main battery opens fire for the first time in her career. Not on Kirishima, not yet. On the Japanese sweep group to the south. The light cruiser Sendai and her destroyers. 9 16-inch shells lift out of the muzzle flashes and arc across the dark water. Each shell weighs 2,700 pounds. Each carries 40 pounds of high explosive in its base. The Japanese on Sendai see the flash before they hear it. A wall of water 900 feet high comes up around their ship. They do what any sane skipper would do. They turn. And they run. Sendai disappears into the smoke of her own funnels. The American radio intercept room aboard Washington picks up Japanese voices on open circuits. Excited, numerous, talking over each other. They had no idea American battleships were here. They have just learned. But Kondo, with the main body, Kirishima, Atago Takao, is still coming north. He has not yet been engaged. He still believes the night belongs to him. And up ahead, the American destroyers have already been seen. Aboard the Japanese destroyer Ayanami, the commanding officer is Commander Eiichi Sakuma. He is a night fighting professional. His lookouts have been dark adapted for hours. He does not need radar. He sees the American destroyers as a column of darker shapes against slightly less dark water. He counts them. He passes the count to his gunners. Ayanami fires first. She launches a spread of Type 93 long lance torpedoes, 24 feet long, 2 tons each, nearly 1,000 pounds of high explosive in the warhead, pure oxygen, no bubbles, almost invisible. 48 knots. The fish enter the water and accelerate. A searchlight snaps on across Ayanami's bridge wing. The beam stabs across the chop and finds Walk. Fraser is illuminated like a man pinned in a stage spot. Every Japanese gun in line of sight opens up. Walke is hit before her own guns finish their first salvo. 5-inch shells punch through her forward superstructure. Fires bloom along the deck. Fraser orders hard left rudder and returns fire. But Ayanami is not alone. 2 more Japanese destroyers join in. The light cruiser Nagara opens up at 8,000 yards. Fraser fires every one of his 10 torpedoes simply to clear the tubes. At least they will not be aboard his ship when she dies. At 23:26, a shell penetrates Walk's forward magazine. Several tons of ammunition detonate at once. The forward half of the ship, from the bow back through the bridge, disintegrates in a single fireball. Commander Fraser is gone before he knows the magazine has been hit. Walk breaks in 2. The bow section sinks immediately. The stern hangs in the water for perhaps 30 seconds, lit by her own fires, before she capsizes and slides under. 75 men die with her. 600 yards behind Walk, on the bridge of USS Preston, Commander Max Storms sees his lead destroyer come apart in front of him. He keeps coming. There is nothing else to do. Preston's guns open on Ayanami and Nagara. Multiple Japanese ships answer at once. The first salvo destroys Preston's SG radar antenna. The second penetrates the after engine room. High-pressure steam lines burst. Every man in that compartment is killed in less than a second. Superheated steam at over 800 degrees Fahrenheit. They do not have time to scream. At 23:30, a long lance hits Preston amidships. Her keel breaks. The ship folds. Storm's orders abandon ship. He stays on the bridge, helping men over the side. He never gets off. Less than 30 seconds later, Preston rolls onto her starboard beam and sinks bow first. 117 men die. Lieutenant Commander John Taylor, the skipper of Benham, sees 2 destroyers gone in front of him in the space of a few minutes. He throws his rudder hard, right to clear the wreckage and the men in the water. The turn probably saves his ship from another torpedo, but not from this one. A Type 93 hits Benham at the waterline, 30 feet back from the stem. The bow vanishes. 60 feet of ship simply ceases to exist. But the torpedo strikes forward of the main watertight bulkhead, and the bulkhead holds. Benham is now 60 feet shorter than she was a minute ago. But she is still floating. Not one of her crew is killed by the torpedo. It is the only good news in the destroyer column. Gwyn is last. She takes a shell in her after-engine room. Several engineers die. One engine goes down. The other holds. Of the 4 destroyers Halsey could scrape together, 2 are on the bottom. 1 is dying. 1 is wounded. The screen no longer exists. Lee has lost more men in 15 minutes than the entire Battle of Midway cost the United States Navy in killed. And 2,000 yards behind Walkie's burning wreckage, something else is happening that Kondo does not yet understand. USS South Dakota is about to take herself out of the fight, and no Japanese gun is going to do it. Her captain is Thomas Gatch, 51 years old, aggressive, the kind of officer who likes to be in front. Earlier in the year, he ran his ship aground in the Tonga Islands. A few weeks later, he collided with the destroyer Mahan. He still has the command. He still wants to fight. When the destroyer action erupts, Gatch maneuvers South Dakota independently. He swings to starboard, looking for a firing solution. It puts him into the burning destroyer water. It puts him silhouetted against the fires of Walk and Preston. But the disaster that ruins South Dakota does not come from outside. It comes from one decision made by one of her own engineers hours before the battle began. A repair team had been working on a circuit breaker in one of the main switchboards. The breaker had a habit of tripping. The chief engineer, under pressure to keep every system online for the coming fight, decided to tie it down, lock it, force it to stay closed even if a fault tried to throw it open. It is a violation of every electrical safety procedure in the United States Navy. It is a violation for a reason. At 23:33, a fault occurs somewhere in the power grid. The breaker that should have tripped does not. It cannot. It is wired shut. So the fault has nowhere to go. It goes everywhere. The next breaker upstream trips. Then the one upstream of that. Then the one upstream of that. In seconds, the entire main electrical distribution of a 35,000-ton battleship cascades into darkness. Radar out, fire direct control out, Gun directors frozen. Ammunition hoists stopped. Radios dead. Ventilation silent. The most modern battleship in the United States Navy goes blind in the middle of an engagement. She has not yet finished joining. She drifts forward on momentum. She has no idea where the Japanese are. She has no way to talk to Lee. By midnight, partial power flickers back. But by then, South Dakota has drifted on momentum to within 5,500 yards of the Japanese line, the inside of a city block in battleship terms. The heavy cruiser Otago snaps on a searchlight. The beam finds her in less than a second. She is perfectly framed, silhouetted from behind by the burning American destroyers, lit from in front by a beam she cannot shoot out. Every Japanese ship in line of sight opens fire. Kirishima's 14-inch main battery fires at point blank. Otago and Takao add their 8-inch guns. Nagara fires 6-inch. The destroyer Asagumo adds 5-inch. South Dakota is hit at least 27 times in 3 minutes. Her armor holds. But everything above the armor is meat to be carved. The forward main battery director takes a direct hit. The men inside are killed by kinetic shock alone. Radar antennas are shattered. Gun mounts are knocked off their pedestals. 39 men are killed. 59 more are wounded. A boatswain's mate, 20 years old, dies in his gun tub. A signalman dies on a wing of the bridge. A Marine posted as a sentry dies at his station with his rifle still slung. Their names are not in the battle dispatches yet. Their names will be in telegrams that arrive at houses across the United States over the next 3 weeks. A mother in Ohio, a father in California, a wife in Norfolk, who is 6 months pregnant. Captain Gatch survives. A shell fragment opens his neck, and he is bleeding heavily before a corpsman reaches him. But he is alive. The ship is alive. The engines are alive. She is also blind. Gatch orders a hard turn to starboard and breaks contact. South Dakota disappears south into the dark. Fires burning along her topsides. Smoke trailing behind her like a flag. She has been in combat with the Japanese main body for less than 5 minutes. In the operations rooms of 3 different Japanese ships. In the chart house of Kondo's flagship Otago, a quiet certainty settles in. They have just defeated the American battleship. They believe it because they have not seen another one. They have not seen another one because Lee has done exactly what he set out to do. Washington is 2,000 yards to the north, in deeper shadow. The Japanese eyes, the famous Japanese night optics, are blinded by their own searchlights, by their own muzzle flashes, by the burning American destroyers, and by the burning South Dakota. Kondo reads the picture in front of him. One American battleship, illuminated, hit, withdrawing. A destroyer screen destroyed. He has won this battle. He believes that. He believes it right up until Washington's first salvo lights the sky. At the same moment, South Dakota is being torn apart in the searchlight 2,000 yards to the south, inside the plotting room of USS Washington. Gears turn. Cams shift. The Mark 8 Range Keeper is being fed range data every 2 seconds, fresh from the Mark 3 fire control radar on the forward director 60 feet above the men's heads. The target is the largest contact remaining in the Japanese line, bearing 330. Range 8,400 yards. Speed 18 knots. 9 16-inch rifles are now pointing at a Japanese battleship none of the men in this compartment has ever seen with their eyes. Captain Davis glances at Lee. Lee is watching the SG repeater, the bright point of light on the screen. Kirishima moves slowly, steadily, fat with overconfidence. Across his display, he has been tracking her for 20 minutes. She does not know he exists. Lee turns his head. His voice on the talker is flat, almost mild. Stand by, Glenn. Here they come. At the order, Washington's 9 16-inch rifles fire as one. The blast lights the sea for half a mile in every direction. It rolls back across the water as a shock wave that empties the air from a man's lungs if he is on deck and forgets to open his mouth. 24,000 pounds of steel and explosive leave the muzzles in a single second. The ship herself heels to starboard from the recoil. 8 feet of new battleship rolling on her keel like a dory in a swell. 9 armor-piercing shells climb into the night. Each shell stands 5.5 feet tall. Each weighs as much as a Volkswagen. Each carries 40 pounds of bursting charge behind a hardened nose. The shells rise to 20,000 feet. At the top of their arc, they come down at a steep angle. The angle that is most dangerous to a battleship, because the angle at the top of the arc finds the deck armor, and the deck armor is the thinnest plate on her. Time of flight, 8,400 yards, 20 seconds. On the bridge of Kirishima, Captain Sanji Iwabuchi is 49 years old. He has spent his career preparing for this moment. A night gun action against another battleship. He has watched his destroyer screen take the American destroyers apart. He has watched searchlights find the American battleship. He has watched her be hit and turn and run. His lookouts are facing forward, watching the approach to Henderson Field. He does not know there is a second American battleship. He learns when the deck explodes under his feet. The first salvo lands on Kirishima's forward superstructure. 2 shells strike the bridge tower. The rangefinder on top disintegrates. Fire control wiring is severed. Communications go dead in the same instant. Men on the bridge are killed by concussion alone. Without a fragment touching them, Iwabuchi is knocked off his feet. He survives. Most of the men around him do not. The second salvo arrives 30 seconds later. 1 shell penetrates the armor deck near the forward magazines. It is the most dangerous hit a battleship can take. Iwabuchi orders the forward magazines flooded. The flooding saves the ship from blowing up. The flooding also disables her entire forward main battery. Kirishima tries to fight anyway. The two after turrets are still mechanically operational. The local gun captains can see the muzzle flashes of Washington's guns to the southwest. There is no radar. There are no optics worth using. There is only the bright, stuttering glare of 9 16-inch rifles firing every 30 seconds. The Japanese gunners estimate range by the brightness of the muzzle blast. They estimate Washington at 10,000 yards. Washington is actually at 8,600, close enough in many wars to be the same number. Not close enough tonight. Kirishima's after turrets fire a salvo of 14-inch shells. They scream out across the dark water at the muzzle flashes that killed her bridge. They pass over Washington's masts by perhaps 200 feet. A sailor on Washington's signal bridge will say later that he could feel the pressure wave on his face. He will say it sounded like an express train going by overhead in the dark. He will say it took everything he had not to duck. 200 feet at 8,000 yards is the difference between a Japanese gunner getting the range right and a Japanese gunner getting it wrong by a hair. If Iwabuchi's men had guessed 8,000 instead of 10,000, the shells would have come down on Washington's deck instead of through her rigging. A salvo of 9 14-inch shells on a battleship's main deck at point blank would have killed scores of men, a guess made by men who could not see their target. That is the entire margin. Washington's third salvo lands amidships. One shell explodes in the forward engine room. Boilers rupture. The engineering watch is killed by superheated steam before any man has time to climb a ladder. Another shell finds the after engine room with similar results. Kirishima's speed begins to fall. 20 knots. 18, 15. The fourth salvo finds the steering. A shell penetrates the deck and explodes in the steering gear compartment near the rudder. The hydraulic lines are cut. Kirishima's rudder jams. She begins to circle slowly to port, unable to control her own course. The fifth salvo opens her below the waterline. The sixth finishes the after turrets, the only guns she had left. Aboard Washington, the gun crews are sweating in the heat of the turrets. The plotting room calls out ranges every 2 seconds. The director's track. The Mark 8 range keeper grinds its gears. Captain Davis paces the bridge in tight steps. Lee stands by the radar repeater, watching the bright point of light that is Kirishima begin to slow and turn and slow again. At 1 minute past midnight, she was moving at 18 knots. At 7 minutes past midnight, she is dead in the water. In the same 7 minutes, Washington has fired 75 rounds of 16-inch and 107 rounds of 5-inch. Deep water surveys of the wreck decades later will suggest that between 9 and 20 of the 16-inch shells hit. The exact count will never be known. Too many went into the water. Too many into spaces that flooded before any human eye could record them. What is known is that Kirishima cannot move, cannot fight, cannot steer, cannot put out her fires. Lee orders ceasefire. There is no point in spending more ammunition on a ship that is already finished. And there are other things to worry about now. The Japanese destroyers have been launching torpedoes the whole time Washington has been firing. Dozens of long lances are in the water, running on courses set by men who guessed at Washington's position from her muzzle flashes. Lee orders the helm hard over. Washington swings hard left, then hard right, zigzagging at 25 knots through a maze of running torpedoes she cannot see. Lookout spot wakes that should not be visible. One passes 100 yards ahead, another 100 yards astern. Another, by one sailor's count, runs the length of the ship within touching distance to starboard. None of them hit. By midnight, Washington is clear. By 3 a.m, Lee gives the order to withdraw. The mission is finished. Henderson Field is safe. Behind them, on a darkened patch of water, 7 miles northwest of Savo Island, Captain Iwabuchi is making his last decision aboard a battleship. Japanese destroyers have come alongside. The wounded are being transferred. The fires cannot be controlled. The list is climbing past 15 degrees. At 3:25 in the morning, Iwabuchi orders the sea opened. He gives the order to abandon ship. His men have done their duty. There is no honor left to extract from staying aboard. Kirishima rolls to starboard and goes down by the bow. 212 men go with her. She sinks in over 3,000 feet of water. USS Washington has not been hit once. Not one man on her crew has been wounded. Her paint is unmarred. The only thing different about her in the morning light is that her 16-inch barrels are blackened from breech to muzzle by the heat of 7 minutes of continuous fire. The action report, Captain Glenn Davis writes, the days afterward contains one sentence that will be quoted in naval war colleges for the next 80 years. Radar has forced the officer in tactical command to base a greater part of his actions on what he is told rather than what he can see. It is a sentence about the end of one age and the beginning of another. A few days later, Lee himself writes to Halsey, and what he writes is not what anyone expects from a man who has just won the only one-on-one battleship gunfight in the history of the United States Navy. He does not take credit. He gives all of it to the radar. We realize then, and it should not be forgotten now, that our entire superiority was due almost entirely to our possession of radar. We have no edge on the Japanese in experience, skill, training, or performance of personnel. A flag officer telling his theater commander, in writing, that his men were not better men, that his training was not better training, that the only reason any of them were still alive was a piece of electronic equipment. It is one of the most honest paragraphs ever written by a victorious commander. The Navy lets it sit in a file. Lee never makes a speech about Guadalcanal. He never appears on a newsreel. He never writes a memoir. He is awarded the Navy Cross. He is promoted to Vice Admiral. He is sent on to the Marianas, to the Philippines, to Iwo Jima, to Okinawa. He commands every fast battleship in the Pacific Fleet for the rest of the war. He works himself sick doing it. Sanji Iwabuchi survives Kirishima. The Japanese promote him to Rear Admiral. They send him to the Philippines. In February of 1945, in the burning ruins of Manila, he refuses to surrender his garrison. The battle for the city kills more than 100,000 Filipino civilians. Iwabuchi dies in the rubble. The Manila Massacre is one of the worst atrocities of the Pacific War. The hand that closes that chapter is a hand that survived Lee's salvos. History runs in straight lines like that, sometimes. On the 25th of August, 1945, 10 days after Japan signs the surrender, 10 days after the war he helped to win officially ends, Vice Admiral Willis Augustus Lee is being ferried in a motor launch across Casco Bay, off Portland, Maine. He is on his way out to his flagship, the old training battleship, USS Wyoming. He is 57 years old. He has not had a full week's rest in 3 years. His heart gives out before the launch reaches the ship. He is dead in the boat. He is buried at Arlington National Cemetery, under a plain white marble headstone. In a row of plain white marble headstones, the inscription gives his name, his rank, his dates of birth and death. It does not mention Guadalcanal. It does not mention Kirishima. It does not mention radar. USS Washington serves out the war. She covers the carriers at the Philippine Sea. She bombards Iwo Jima and Okinawa. She is at the surrender ceremony in Tokyo Bay. She brings soldiers home from Europe after VJ Day. The Navy puts her in reserve in 1947. In 1961, she is sold for scrap. Her 16-inch barrels are burned through with torches. Her armor plate is melted down. By the end of the year, the ship that destroyed a Japanese battleship in 7 minutes no longer exists as a ship. In 2019, an expedition led by the late Paul Allen aboard the research vessel Petrel found Kirishima on the bottom, upside down, her turrets broken from their seats and resting in the silt beside her hull, the wounds Washington put in her, still visible in the lights of a deep-water camera. But the idea Washington fought by is still at sea, on every flag bridge, in every navy in the world. The Combat Information Center, the central nervous system of a modern warship, where radar and sonar and electronic warfare and weapons control all feed into one room, with one tactical picture. It was created in the months after Guadalcanal by Navy planners who finally understood what Lee had built into Washington. The CIC is now standard on every warship larger than a patrol boat. It is the architecture of how a ship at sea fights, and it traces a direct line back through the plotting room of a single battleship on a single night. In November of 1942, a quiet man in wire-rimmed glasses changed the way the sea is fought. He is buried under a stone that does not say so. He would have preferred it that way.